The war room deep beneath Earth's surface had not been used in decades. Now it was filled with humanity's most powerful leaders and its most dangerous minds. Admiral Daehyun stood at the head of the table, his face showing the exhaustion of 3 sleepless days. Around him sat generals, scientists, and intelligence officers, all waiting to learn what humanity's options truly were. Director Sang-min entered the room carrying a black case. He was an old man now, having dedicated 40 years to a project that most of humanity never knew existed. His hands shook slightly as he placed the case on the table and opened it. Inside were data chips containing information that could either save humanity or doom it forever. The Project Prometheus files were displayed on the screens around the room. What they showed made even hardened military officers go pale. For decades, a secret branch of human research had been developing weapons that violated every ethical guideline, every treaty, every principle of civilized warfare. These were weapons designed not to win battles, but to destroy civilizations. Sang-min began his presentation with a simple question. What happens when a species encounters aliens who want to enslave or destroy them? The answer, he explained, was that the species either submits or fights with everything they have. Project Prometheus was born from studying Earth's own dark history. Humanity knew what conquest looked like because humans had done it to each other for thousands of years. They understood that predators exist, and sometimes the only way to survive a predator is to become something worse. The first weapon Sang-min revealed was the relativistic kinetic missile. It was simple in concept but devastating in execution. Launch a large mass at 90% the speed of light toward a target. When it impacts, the energy release would be greater than any nuclear weapon. The Council's shields were designed to stop energy weapons and conventional missiles. They had never considered something as primitive and brutal as hurling rocks at near-light speed. Commander Yoon-hee studied the weapons data with grim focus. She had spent 20 years in special operations, learning to fight wars that officially did not exist. Now she was looking at tools that could help her rescue Ji-woo and the other hostages. But she also saw weapons that terrified her. Grey goo nanomachines that could consume entire planets. Quantum disruptors that could tear apart matter at the atomic level. Artificial singularity generators that could create small black holes. These were not weapons of war. These were weapons of extinction. Engineer Tai Yang was brought into the room next. He was young, barely 30, but he was also the most brilliant physicist humanity had produced in a generation. He had been working on experimental shield technology that could protect human ships from Council weapons. When shown the Prometheus arsenal, his first reaction was horror. His second reaction was to start calculating how to deploy these weapons most effectively. The morality of using such weapons could be debated later. Right now, humanity needed to survive. Captain Hyun-woo was analyzing Council military tactics when he discovered something crucial. The Council had not fought a real war in over 1,000 years. Their military existed mainly to intimidate primitive species into submission. Their combat doctrine was based on overwhelming force and advanced technology, but it lacked adaptability. They expected enemies to surrender when faced with superior firepower. They had never faced an enemy who refused to give up, who would use any weapon, pay any price to remain free. The tactical weakness Hyun-woo found was elegant in its simplicity. Council shields operated on fixed frequencies cycling through standard patterns. This made them incredibly efficient and powerful against expected threats. But if an enemy could generate rapidly shifting frequencies, changing faster than the shields could adapt, the shields would fail. It would require enormous power and sophisticated computers, but human ships could potentially do it. The Council's greatest defense could become their greatest vulnerability. Yoon-hee began planning the hostage rescue operation. It would be nearly impossible under normal circumstances. Axis Prime was the most heavily defended location in Council space, protected by thousands of ships and defensive platforms. But if humanity launched a major offensive elsewhere, drawing Council forces away, a small team might be able to infiltrate the planet using experimental stealth technology. It was a desperate plan with minimal chance of success, but doing nothing was not an option. 20 days remained until the Council's deadline. Earth's governments had finally reached a decision, though it was far from unanimous. They would not surrender. They would not submit to vassalage. If the Council wanted to destroy humanity, they would learn that humans do not die quietly. Some politicians still argued for negotiation, for compromise, but Daehyun made it clear that the time for talk had passed. The Council had murdered 50,000 civilians as a demonstration. They had taken Earth's diplomats hostage. They had demanded humanity's freedom in exchange for mere survival. There would be no negotiation with such creatures. The military mobilization began in secret. Human ships across 12 star systems received encrypted orders. Colonial defense forces were activated. Reservists were called to duty. Weapons factories that had been idle for decades roared back to life. Sangmin's teams began installing the Prometheus weapon systems on select ships. These vessels would become humanity's hammer, striking at Council targets with unprecedented force. Specialist Boram worked in the Cyber Warfare Division, a branch of the military that most people did not even know existed. She was a genius at breaking into computer systems, finding vulnerabilities and exploiting them. Now she studied the Council's networks, searching for ways to infiltrate their communications and command systems. The Council relied heavily on automated systems and artificial intelligence. Ironic, given that they had demanded humanity abandon such technology. Boram found what she needed: backdoors in the Council's own AI systems that could be exploited by human hackers. Tai Yang worked around the clock with his engineering teams, installing the frequency-shifting generators on human warships. The technology was untested in real combat, and there was a significant chance it would overload and destroy the ships trying to use it. But Daehyun approved it anyway. Better to die fighting with every advantage they could create than to surrender tamely. With 5 days left until the deadline, Daehyun gave the order that would change galactic history. Earth went dark. All communications ceased. All broadcasts stopped. To outside observers, it appeared that humanity had finally accepted the reality of their situation. The Council congratulated themselves on breaking another primitive species. They prepared to send occupation forces to Earth, ready to begin the process of turning humans into obedient vassals. But in the darkness, humanity was moving. Fleets departed from hidden bases. Strike forces positioned themselves at the edges of Council space. Yoonhee's rescue team boarded a stealth ship equipped with quantum cloaking technology that might or might not work. Every human soldier, sailor, and pilot knew what was at stake. They were not fighting for territory or resources. They were fighting for the right to exist as free beings. Daehyun sat alone in his quarters the night before the operation was to begin. He thought about the 50,000 dead colonists. He thought about Jiwoo and the others imprisoned on Axis Prime. He thought about the billions of humans across 12 star systems who were depending on him to keep them free. And he thought about the weapons he was about to unleash. Weapons that would kill millions, perhaps billions. Weapons that would mark humanity as something terrible and dangerous in the eyes of every species in the galaxy. But the alternative was slavery. The alternative was watching his species become the Council's property. Their children raised to serve alien masters, their culture slowly erased over generations. That was not survival. That was extinction with extra steps. So Daehyun made peace with what was coming. Humanity would show the galaxy their fury, and the stars themselves would tremble. 3 months after the war began, the galaxy was unrecognizable. The Council that had ruled for 10,000 years was gone, shattered by human fury and their own crimes. Admiral Daehyun stood before the War Crimes Tribunal on Earth, watching as former Council leaders faced judgment for their atrocities. Some species called him a hero, others called him a war criminal. He was not sure which label fit better. The trials revealed the full scope of Council evil. Leaders who had ordered genocide testified without remorse, explaining that they had simply been maintaining order. Scientists who had experimented on living subjects showed no guilt, stating that their research had been for the greater good. The casual cruelty was somehow worse than active malice. These beings had destroyed civilizations and felt nothing. They had seen other species as resources to be managed, not as people with rights and dreams. Ambassador Jiwoo led the prosecution team. She had recovered physically from her captivity, but the mental scars remained. She spoke calmly and clearly as she presented evidence of Council crimes. Recordings of orders to destroy primitive species, medical logs detailing torture and experimentation, financial records showing how the Council had profited from slave labor for centuries. The evidence was overwhelming and undeniable, but Jiwoo also faced questions about human conduct during the war. The singularity weapons had killed billions. The relativistic missiles had destroyed entire fleets along with nearby civilian stations. Human forces had shown no mercy to Council military personnel, often refusing surrender when it was offered. Critics argued that humanity had become as monstrous as the Council they fought against. Dr. Yunbi worked with former Council species to establish truth and reconciliation processes. It was painful work, listening to stories of suffering that spanned generations. She met beings whose grandparents had been enslaved, whose cultures had been systematically erased, whose languages had been forbidden. The Council's crimes went beyond physical violence. They had tried to destroy the very identity of the species they controlled. Young Officer Minji represented a new generation of humans who had to live with the consequences of the war. She had been a cadet when the war began, thrust into combat before her training was complete. She had watched friends die, had killed enemy soldiers herself, and had seen the devastation caused by human weapons. Now she questioned whether the victory had been worth the cost. Minji confronted Dae-hyun one evening after the tribunal sessions ended. She asked him directly, was it necessary to kill 8 billion beings with the singularity weapons? Could humanity have won the war without crossing that line? Dae-hyun had no easy answers. He explained that the Council had been preparing to use biological weapons that could have killed every human in the galaxy. The singularity attack had been a response to an existential threat. But he admitted that the decision haunted him every day. The debate raged across human space. Some argued that humanity should embrace its role as the galaxy's dominant military power. They had proven they could destroy any enemy. Why not use that power to establish a human empire? Others wanted to return to isolation, to seal Earth's borders and have nothing more to do with alien species. The trauma of the war had convinced them that contact with aliens only brought death. Jiwoo had a different vision. She proposed the creation of the Galactic Compact, a new alliance based on principles that the Council had violated. Voluntary membership with no forced vassalage, mutual defense without military domination, free trade without economic exploitation, shared technology without restrictions on development. Most importantly, absolute prohibition on the use of extinction-level weapons. The singularity generators would be dismantled. The relativistic missiles would be banned. Humanity would prove it was better than the Council by choosing restraint after victory. The proposal faced fierce opposition. Military leaders argued that dismantling the Prometheus weapons left humanity vulnerable to future threats. Politicians worried that other species would see human restraint as weakness. Director Sang-min, who had created many of these weapons, initially opposed their elimination. He had spent his entire career preparing humanity for hostile contact, and now they wanted to throw away the tools that had saved them. But slowly, opinion shifted. The liberated species began expressing support for Jiwoo's vision. They had lived under Council tyranny and did not want to see humanity become the new tyrant. Several species offered to join the Galactic Compact if it was based on equality and mutual respect. Even some former Council members, horrified by the revelations of their leadership's crimes, applied for membership in the new alliance. Engineer Taiyang led the effort to convert military technology to peaceful purposes. The frequency-shifting generators that had protected human ships could be adapted for civilian use, creating better shields for space stations and colony vessels. The quantum cloaking technology could help scientists study dangerous phenomena without putting researchers at risk. Much of the Prometheus project had been evil in its intent, but the underlying science could serve peaceful purposes. General Dongwu returned from the liberation campaigns changed by what he had seen. He had witnessed the aftermath of Council rule on dozens of worlds. He had seen beings who had forgotten their own history, their cultures erased by generations of oppression. He had helped them reclaim their freedom, and they had looked at him with gratitude and hope. Dongwu realized that humanity's greatest achievement was not military victory, but the liberation of enslaved species. The signing of the Galactic Compact took place on Earth, in the same city where the Council had first made contact with humanity. 43 species sent representatives to join as founding members. The ceremony was simple and dignified. Each species pledged to respect the sovereignty of others, to defend allies against aggression, and to never use weapons of extinction. Humanity, despite being the strongest military power present, took no special privileges. They were one member among many, equal in voice and vote. Admiral Dae-hyun attended the ceremony but did not speak. He was officially retired now. though his influence remained strong. He watched as species that had been enemies months ago signed an agreement to coexist peacefully. He saw hope in their faces, belief that this new alliance would be different from the Council. He wanted to believe it too, but he could not forget the 8 billion lives ended by weapons he had authorized. After the ceremony, Dae-hyun gave his final speech to the assembled delegates. He spoke simply and honestly. Humanity had shown the galaxy their fury when threatened with extinction. They had proven that they would use any weapon, pay any price to remain free. But now they needed to show the galaxy something else: compassion and peace. The war had been necessary to stop the Council's tyranny, but it must never be repeated. Humanity had fought not to conquer but to ensure freedom for themselves and all species. That principle must guide the Galactic Compact. Jiwoo watched human ships departing Earth orbit, heading out to patrol former Council space. They went not as conquerors but as guardians, protecting the shipping lanes and responding to distress calls from any species. The transformation from weapons of war to tools of peace was beginning. It would take generations to fully heal the wounds the war had created. But at least the healing had started. Commander Yoon-hee trained the next generation of human special forces, but the lessons had changed. She taught them how to fight, yes, but also when not to fight. She explained that the greatest victories sometimes came from showing restraint, from choosing mercy when violence was possible. The soldiers who had rescued her from Axis Prime were heroes not because they killed efficiently, but because they had saved lives and exposed the truth. Dr. Yoonbi published her research on Council species, helping humanity understand the diverse forms of life in the galaxy. She worked to preserve the cultures that the Council had tried to erase, recording languages and traditions that had survived only in the memories of the enslaved. It was patient, careful work, the opposite of the violence that had dominated recent months. But it was necessary work, rebuilding what tyranny had destroyed. Specialist Bo Ram shifted her talents from breaking systems to protecting them. She helped species who had been freed from Council control to establish secure communications networks and defensive systems. She taught them how to protect themselves from the kind of cyber attacks she had used during the war. The same skills that had helped win the war now served peace. Captain Hyun-woo took command of a new class of exploration vessels, designed to seek out species that the Council had never contacted. The goal was to make first contact properly this time, with respect and honesty. Hyun-woo's tactical genius was still valuable, but now he used it to anticipate problems and avoid conflicts rather than to win battles. Officer Minji eventually understood why the war had been necessary, though she never stopped questioning its methods. She became an advocate for strict controls on military power, ensuring that humanity's weapons would only be used for defense. She represented a generation that had seen the cost of war and was determined to find better solutions to future conflicts. When the Council provoked humanity, the brutal response shattered the STARS HFY Sci-Fi Story outline in 5 parts. Part 1. The First Contact Betrayal Setting. The year is 2347. Humanity has achieved faster-than-light travel and established colonies across 12 star systems. The Galactic Council, a coalition of 47 alien species, makes first contact with Earth through diplomatic envoys. Main characters: Admiral Dae-hyun, commander of the Human Defense Fleet, a decorated veteran with a cautious approach to alien. Relations Ambassador Jiwoo, female. Earth's chief diplomat, idealistic and believing in peaceful cooperation. Captain Hyun-woo, young tactical officer aboard the flagship Indomitable, known for unconventional thinking. Dr. Eunbi, female. Xenobiologist and cultural specialist assigned to the first contact team plot points. The Council arrives with promises of trade, technology exchange, and membership in galactic civilization. Humanity is invited to send delegations to the Council's central world. Axis Prime Ambassador Jiwoo and her team travel to Axis Prime, while Admiral Dae-hyun remains suspicious. The Council presents strict regulations. Humans must limit their expansion, disarm most military vessels, and surrender their AI research. When Jiwoo questions these terms, the Council reveals their true intention. Humanity must become a vassal species, providing resources and labor. The Council demonstrates their power by destroying the human colony. On Kepler 442b, killing 50,000 civilians, Jiwoo's delegation is taken hostage. The Council issues an ultimatum: submit within 30 days or face extinction. Part 2. The hidden arsenal setting Earth and its colonies go on high alert. Emergency sessions convene across all human governments as the 30-day countdown begins. Main characters: Admiral Dae-hyun takes command of humanity's response. Director Sang-min, head of the classified Prometheus project, a secret weapons research program. Commander Yoon-hee, female. Special operations leader, expert in asymmetric warfare. Engineer Tae-yang, brilliant physicist working on experimental weapons plot points. Admiral Dae-hyun refuses to surrender and begins mobilizing the Human Defense Fleet. The existence of the Prometheus project is revealed to military leadership. For decades, humanity has been secretly developing weapons banned by all galactic civilizations. These weapons include relativistic kinetic missiles, quantum disruptor bombs, gray goo nanomachines, and artificial singularity generators. Director Sang-min explains that humanity always prepared for hostile first contact, learning from Earth's own history of colonization. Commander Yoon-hee proposes a daring rescue mission to extract Ambassador Jiwoo and the hostages. The Council sends a second fleet to Earth orbit as a show of force, expecting immediate surrender. Hyun-woo analyzes Council military tactics and discovers a critical weakness. Their shields cannot adapt to rapidly shifting frequencies. With 5 days remaining, Dae-hyun makes the decision to strike first. Earth goes dark, all communications cease, appearing to the Council as if humanity has accepted defeat. Part 3. The Fury Unleashed setting. The war begins across multiple star systems simultaneously. Humanity launches Operation Ragnarok. Main characters: Admiral Dae-hyun, commanding the main battle fleet. Commander Yoon-hee. Leading the hostage rescue team. Captain Hyun-woo. Commanding the Stealth Strike Force Specialist Bo-ram, female. Cyber warfare expert tasked with infiltrating Council networks. Plot points: human fleets emerge from faster than light at the edge of Council space, targeting military installations and supply lines. Captain Hyun-woo's stealth ships use quantum cloaking technology, untested and dangerous, to penetrate Axis Prime's defenses. Commander Yoon-hee's team inserts onto Axis Prime, fighting through Council security with brutal efficiency. The Council is shocked by human ferocity and technological innovation. Their intelligence had severely underestimated Earth's capabilities. Specialist Bo-ram hacks into Council command networks, spreading viruses that cripple their coordination. Human forces deploy the first banned weapon, relativistic kinetic missiles, traveling at 90% light speed, obliterating 3 Council naval bases before they can react. The Battle of Sirius Station. Admiral Dae-hyun's fleet faces the Council's 7th Armada in brutal ship-to-ship combat. Using Hyun-woo's frequency shifting tactic, human vessels tear through Council shields. Yoon-hee successfully rescues Ambassador Jiwoo and the hostages, but discovers horrific evidence. The Council had been torturing prisoners to study human physiology for biological weapons. The hostage rescue team escapes as Hyun-woo's ships bombard the Council military headquarters from orbit. Part 4. No mercy, no surrender setting. The war intensifies as humanity demonstrates it will not be stopped. The Council scrambles to mount a defense as member species begin to question their leadership. Main characters: Admiral Dae-hyun, pressing the offensive deeper into Council territory. Ambassador Jiwoo returns to Earth, traumatized but determined to see the Council defeated. General Dong-woo, ground forces commander leading planetary invasions. Intelligence officer Subin, female, discovering the Council's darkest secrets. Plot points: humanity refuses all ceasefire offers, demanding unconditional surrender. General Dong-woo's Marines land on Council worlds, liberating enslaved species and exposing the Council's crimes. Intelligence officer Subin uncovers classified records. The Council has committed genocide against 13 species who Refused vassalage Ambassador Jiwoo broadcast this evidence across the galaxy, turning public opinion against the Council. Several Council member species defect, joining humanity or declaring neutrality. The Council deploys their reserve fleet, over 10,000 warships, in a desperate attempt to stop the human advance, the Battle of the Void. In deep space between star systems, the largest space battle in galactic history erupts. Admiral Daehyun deploys quantum disruptor bombs that create massive electromagnetic pulses, disabling entire Council battle groups. When the Council attempts to use biological weapons against human colonies, Daehyun makes a fateful decision. He authorizes the use of artificial singularity generators against Council High Command's fortified system. 3 small black holes are deployed, consuming the Council's most heavily defended star system. 5 Council worlds and their entire military leadership are annihilated in hours. The galaxy watches in horror and, as humanity demonstrates it will burn the stars themselves rather than submit. Part 5. A new galactic order setting. 3 months after the war began, the Council is shattered. Humanity stands victorious but faces the consequences of its brutal campaign. Main characters. Admiral Daehyun, now considered both a hero and a war criminal by different factions. Ambassador Jiwoo, leading efforts to build a new galactic government. Dr. Hyunbi, working to heal the trauma between species. Young officer Min-ji, female, representing the next generation, questioning the cost of victory. Plot points. The Council formally surrenders, with surviving leadership facing war crimes tribunals. Humanity discovers the full extent of Council atrocities, slave worlds, genetic experimentation, cultural genocide. The liberated species view humans as saviors, but many neutral species fear Earth's military power. Admiral Daehyun is celebrated on Earth but struggles with the weight of his decisions. Particularly the Singularity attack. Ambassador Jiwoo proposes the Galactic Compact, a new alliance based on mutual defense and voluntary membership, with strict prohibitions against forced vassalage. Internal debate rages on Earth. Some want to dominate the galaxy as the Council did. Others want to return to isolation. Officer Min-ji confronts Daehyun about the civilian casualties from the Singularity weapons, representing growing unease among younger humans. Dr. Hyunbi works with former Council species to establish truth and reconciliation processes. The story concludes with the signing of the Galactic Compact on Earth. 43 species join as equal members, with humanity taking no special privileges. Despite their military dominance, Admiral Daehyun retires, giving a final speech. We showed the galaxy our fury when threatened. Now we must show them our compassion and peace. We fought not to conquer, but to ensure freedom for ourselves and all species. The final scene shows human ships patrolling former Council space, not as conquerors, but as guardians. Jiwoo reflects that humanity's greatest victory was not shattering the Council, but proving that power need not corrupt. A new era begins, where humans, once threatened with extinction, now stand as protectors of galactic liberty. Themes humanity's duality. The capacity for both extreme violence and profound compassion. Preparation versus paranoia. The vindication of humanity's paranoid preparations for hostile contact. The cost of victory. Examining whether brutal methods are justified by righteous goals. Power and responsibility. How humanity chooses to use its newfound dominance. Unity through adversity. Humanity setting aside internal conflicts when facing external threats. Tone. The story maintains a dark, militaristic tone in the war sections while exploring moral complexity throughout. The HFY, Humanity Fuck Yeah elements showcase human ingenuity, determination, and refusal to submit, while never glorifying war crimes or unnecessary cruelty. The ending provides hope that humanity can be better than its enemies, even after demonstrating equal capacity for destruction. The Council's military command center on Axis Prime was a place of absolute confidence. For 10,000 years, the Council had maintained order through superior technology and overwhelming force. They had never lost a war because primitive species always surrendered when faced with the Council's might. Admiral Dae-hyun was about to teach them a lesson in human stubbornness. The attack began at exactly midnight, Earth Standard Time. Across 20 different star systems, human ships emerged from faster-than-light travel and opened fire on Council military installations. The Council defenders were caught completely off guard. They had expected Earth to surrender. Instead, they found themselves under assault by an enemy they had underestimated. Captain Hyun-woo commanded a strike force of 12 ships equipped with the experimental frequency-shifting generators. Their target was the Council's main supply depot near the Sirius system. The depot was defended by over 100 Council warships, each one larger and more powerful than any human vessel. Under normal circumstances, it would have been suicide to attack such a target. But these were not normal circumstances. As the Council ships moved to intercept, Hyun-woo gave the order to activate the new shield generators. The human ships began broadcasting on hundreds of different frequencies simultaneously, shifting patterns faster than any organic mind could track. The Council weapons fired, expecting their superior firepower to vaporize the human vessels in seconds. Instead, their shots splashed harmlessly against shields that their weapons could not penetrate. The confusion among Council forces was immediate and total. Their technology was supposed to be superior. Their shields were supposed to be impenetrable. Yet these primitive humans were shrugging off attacks that should have destroyed them. Before the Council commanders could adapt, the human ships returned fire with weapons that were crude but effective. Railguns firing solid metal projectiles at incredible speeds, nuclear missiles modified for space combat. And then, the terror weapon. The relativistic kinetic missile was launched from a safe distance. It was simply a large tungsten rod, but it was accelerated to 90% the speed of light. When it struck the supply depot, the impact released energy equivalent to a large nuclear weapon. The depot and everything within 100 kilometers was vaporized instantly. The Council ships in the area were destroyed by the shockwave. The survivors fled in panic, broadcasting desperate warnings about human weapons that defied everything they knew about warfare. Meanwhile, Commander Yoon-hee's rescue team was approaching Axis Prime using experimental quantum cloaking technology. The principle was simple: bend light and sensor waves around the ship, making it effectively invisible. The reality was terrifying. The cloak was unstable, fluctuating randomly. If it failed while they were near Council ships, they would be destroyed instantly. Yoon-hee watched the readouts with sweat running down her face as they slipped past layer after layer of Council defenses. On Axis Prime, Ji-woo heard the distant sounds of alarms. Something was happening, something that had the Council guards running in confusion. She gathered the other human prisoners, preparing them for whatever was coming. They had no weapons, no way to fight, but they were ready. If this was their chance for freedom, they would take it. Specialist Boram was working her magic against the Council's networks. She had spent weeks studying their systems, finding vulnerabilities that the arrogant Council had never bothered to fix. Now she unleashed a series of viruses designed to cause maximum chaos. Communications networks went down. Targeting systems began giving false readings. Automated defenses started firing at their own ships. The Council's reliance on technology became their weakness as human hackers turned their own systems against them. The Battle of Sirius Station was where Dae-hyun committed his main fleet. The Council's 7th Armada was stationed there, over 2,000 warships representing the bulk of their military power in this sector. The Council commanders expected the humans to avoid such a powerful force. Instead, Dae-hyun led his fleet straight toward them. It was the most direct challenge possible, a statement that humanity would not hide or run. The battle was brutal. Human ships were outnumbered 10-1, but they fought with a ferocity that shocked the Council forces. When shields failed, human captains rammed their ships into Council vessels. When weapons were destroyed, human crews used their ships as missiles, setting them on collision courses with enemy targets. The Council had never faced an enemy willing to die rather than retreat. Taeyang's frequency-shifting technology proved decisive. The Council's superior weapons could not penetrate the human shields, while human weapons, though less advanced, were effective enough when they could actually hit their targets. The tide of battle slowly turned. One by one, Council ships were destroyed or disabled. The survivors retreated, broadcasting messages of shock and fear. The primitive humans were not supposed to be able to do this. Yoon-hee's team successfully infiltrated Axis Prime, their quantum cloak holding just long enough to get them through the orbital defenses. They landed near the facility where the human prisoners were held and began their assault. The council guards were elite soldiers, trained and equipped with the best technology. But they had never faced opponents like human special forces soldiers who had trained their entire lives for close combat. The firefight was short and vicious. Human weapons were simple compared to council energy weapons, but bullets worked just fine for killing. Yun-hee's team moved through the facility like a force of nature, eliminating guards and freeing prisoners. When they reached Ji-woo's cell, the ambassador was ready, having organized the other prisoners to help with the escape. But Ji-woo insisted they make one stop before leaving. She had learned where the council kept their classified archives, including records of their treatment of other primitive species. Yun-hee wanted to leave immediately, but she understood why this mattered. They raided the archive facility, downloading everything they could carry. What they found there would change the entire war. The files showed the true face of the council. They had not just subjugated species, they had experimented on them. Biological weapons testing using living subjects, genetic modification programs to make slave species more obedient, records of entire civilizations being erased when they proved too difficult to control. The council was not a government maintaining galactic peace. They were monsters wearing the mask of civilization. Hyun-woo's ships began the bombardment of council military headquarters, while Yun-hee's team escaped with the prisoners. The orbital bombardment was merciless. Every military installation on Axis Prime was targeted and destroyed. The council's central command structure was shattered in hours. The beings who had casually ordered the destruction of Kepler 442b now experienced the terror of watching their own world burn. Dae-hyun received the reports of successful operations across all fronts. Human forces had struck 20 targets simultaneously and achieved their objectives at 19 of them. The one failure had been complete with all ships lost, but that was acceptable. They had proven that humanity could fight and win against a vastly superior force. The Council's aura of invincibility was shattered. The Admiral authorized the next phase of operations. If the Council wanted a demonstration of power, humanity would provide one. A quantum disruptor bomb was deployed against a Council fleet that was moving to counterattack. The bomb created a massive electromagnetic pulse that disabled every ship within 1,000 kilometers. The Council vessels drifted helplessly in space, their crews trapped as human ships methodically destroyed them one by one. News of the battles spread across the galaxy within hours. Species that had been enslaved by the Council for generations watched in amazement as the humans refused to surrender. Some began to hope. Others prepared to hide, fearing that humanity might be even worse than the Council. But everyone understood that the galactic order that had existed for 10,000 years was ending. Ji-woo stood on the bridge of Yun-hee's ship as they escaped from Axis Prime. She watched the, Council's capital world shrinking behind them. Fires still burning where human weapons had struck. She felt no satisfaction in the destruction, only grim determination. The Council had forced this war. They had left humanity no choice but to fight back with everything they had. Now they would learn that there are worse things in the universe than the Council. They would learn that humanity, when threatened with extinction, becomes something terrible and unstoppable. The fury had been unleashed, and the stars themselves would bear witness to what humanity could do when pushed too far. The Council's attempt at a ceasefire came exactly 1 week after the war began. Their diplomats broadcast messages across all channels, offering to negotiate a peaceful resolution. They spoke of misunderstandings and suggested that both sides should return to the discussion table. Admiral Dae-hyun's response was brief and brutal: unconditional surrender or total war. There would be no middle ground. Ambassador Ji-woo returned to Earth traumatized but unbroken. She had been tortured by the Council, not for information but for research. They had wanted to study human physiology, to develop biological weapons specifically designed to kill humans efficiently. The medical teams who examined her and the other rescued prisoners found evidence of experiments that violated every ethical standard. Burns from energy weapons tested at different intensities. Injection marks from various chemical compounds. Genetic samples taken forcibly. The Council had treated them like laboratory animals. When Ji-woo learned of Dae-hyun's rejection of the ceasefire, she supported it completely. Her idealism had died in that Council prison. She had seen the true face of galactic civilization, And it was monstrous. Now she worked to expose the Council's crimes to every species in the galaxy. The files that Yunhee's team had retrieved from Axis Prime became humanity's most powerful weapon in the propaganda war. Intelligence Officer. Subin spent days translating and analyzing the captured Council archives. What she found was worse than anyone had imagined. The Council had committed genocide against 13 species who had refused to accept vassalage. Not quick extermination, but slow destruction. They would bomb a species back to primitive conditions, destroy their infrastructure and technology, then leave them to die over generations. It was cruelty on a scale that made human history look gentle by comparison. Subin compiled all the evidence into a comprehensive report that Jiwoo broadcast across the galaxy. Every species with communications technology received the files. The Council's crimes were laid bare for all to see. Images of destroyed civilizations, recordings of Council leaders casually discussing the elimination of primitive species, medical records of experiments conducted on living subjects. The galaxy was forced to confront what their supposed protectors had been doing for thousands of years. The effect was immediate and powerful. Several species that had been Council members for centuries immediately declared their withdrawal. They had not known the full extent of the Council's crimes, or so they claimed. Others declared neutrality, refusing to support either side. Some of the enslaved species began open rebellions. Seeing humanity's war as their chance for freedom, the Council's alliance was fracturing. General Dongwu led the ground invasions of Council worlds. These were not campaigns of conquest but liberation missions. Human Marines landed on planets where enslaved species had been forced to work in mines and factories. They freed prisoners, destroyed Council control systems, and helped local populations establish their own governments. Everywhere they went, the humans were seen as liberators, not conquerors. But the Council was not finished. They gathered their reserve fleets, ships that had been held back for centuries, as a final defense. Over 10,000 warships began moving toward human space. It was the largest military force ever assembled in galactic history. The Council leadership made it clear humanity would be destroyed completely, erased from existence as a warning to any other species that might consider rebellion. The Battle of the Void took place in deep space between star systems, far from any planet or sun. Daehyun led the human fleet to meet the Council armada. Every available human warship was committed to the battle. This would decide everything. If humanity won, the Council was finished. If humanity lost, Earth and all her colonies would be destroyed. The battle lasted for 3 days. Ships fought and died by the thousands. The vacuum of space filled with debris and the flash of weapons fire. Human crews fought without sleep, pushing their vessels beyond safe limits. The Council forces had numbers and technology. The humans had desperation and fury. Neither side would retreat. Neither side could afford to lose. Captain Hyunwoo's tactics proved crucial once again. He organized the human ships into small, fast-moving groups that could concentrate fire on individual Council vessels. The frequency-shifting shields continued to give humans an advantage in defense, while their willingness to take risks gave them an edge in offense. Hyunwoo himself led a suicide run through the center of the Council formation, his small group of ships destroying 3 capital vessels before being forced to retreat. On the second day of battle, the Council deployed biological weapons. Missiles filled with engineered viruses were fired toward human ships, designed to breach hulls and infect the crews. It was a desperate move and a foolish one. The missiles were intercepted before they could reach their targets, but the attempt revealed how far the Council was willing to go. They had accused humanity of being too violent and dangerous to be allowed freedom, yet they were using weapons that could kill billions. Daehyun made his decision in that moment. If the Council wanted to use weapons of mass destruction, humanity would respond in kind. He authorized the use of artificial singularity generators against the Council High Command's fortified system. It was the most devastating weapon in the Prometheus arsenal, technology that should never have been created. But the time for restraint had passed. 3 small black holes were deployed in the star system where the Council's leadership had retreated. The gravitational effects were catastrophic. Planets were torn apart. Stations and ships were pulled into the singularities and destroyed. 5 Council worlds, home to billions of beings, were consumed in a matter of hours. The Council High Command was annihilated completely. Those who had ordered the destruction of Kepler 442b experienced the same fate they had inflicted on humanity. The galaxy watched in horror as human weapons literally destroyed star systems. Some species declared that humanity was worse than the Council, monsters who would burn the universe rather than submit. Others understood that humanity had been pushed to this extreme by the Council's own actions. But everyone agreed on one thing. Humanity was terrifying. They were a species that would use any weapon, pay any price to remain free. The Battle of the Void ended on the third day when the remaining Council ships retreated. They had lost over half their fleet. The humans had lost nearly as many ships, but they held the field. Daehyun's victory came at a terrible cost, but it was still victory. The Council's military power was broken. Their leadership was dead. Their alliance was falling apart. The war was effectively over. But Jiwoo knew that the hard part was just beginning. Humanity had won through brutal methods that would haunt them for generations. They had become the thing they fought against, using weapons of extinction against populated worlds. Yes, those worlds had been enemy territory. Yes, the Council would have done the same to Earth without hesitation. But that did not change the fact that billions had died because of human weapons. Subin compiled casualty estimates that made everyone in Earth's war room sick. The singularity weapons had killed approximately 8 billion Council citizens, most of them civilians who had no say in their government's decisions. The relativistic missiles and quantum disruptors had killed millions more. The total death toll from 3 months of war exceeded anything in human history. Earth had saved itself by becoming the galaxy's greatest killer. The Council sent a formal surrender offer after the Battle of the Void. They would dissolve their government, release all subjugated species, and submit to whatever terms humanity demanded. They begged only that Earth not deploy any more singularity weapons. Daehyun accepted the surrender but made it clear that war crimes trials would be held for all Council leaders who had ordered atrocities. General Dongwoo's Marines continued their liberation missions. Now unopposed by Council forces, they found horrors on every world they freed. Slave camps where beings had been worked to death. Medical facilities where living subjects had been used for experiments. Mass graves of species that had resisted too strongly. The Council's crimes were beyond counting, beyond comprehension. Whatever humanity had done during the war, it paled in comparison to what the Council had done over thousands of years. Yet Jiwoo could not shake the feeling that humanity had crossed a line that should never have been crossed. They had won their freedom and saved their species from extinction, but they had done so by showing the galaxy that humans were capable of terrible destruction. Every species now looked at Earth with fear. Humanity was free, but they were also alone, isolated by the fear they had created. The stars belonged to humanity now, but the victory felt hollow.